everybody, it's Sara. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you all about the way that Kaz and Inej were portrayed in season 2 of Shadow and Bone. I really hesitated before deciding to film this video because I don't usually make like very specific rant videos, so I'm a little bit nervous to talk about this. Also, I was thinking that I would probably like give you all of my thoughts in my reaction videos to the second season of Shadow and Bone, which will be coming at some point. So if you're interested in that, keep your eyes out. But yeah, I felt like if I did that, some of these videos would be like way too long because I have many things to say. So in case you don't know, in case this is like the first video of mine that you're seeing, I am a very big Kanej stan. They're literally my favorite ship of all time. Inej is my favorite character of all time. I wrote my master's thesis about her, and Kaz is honestly very close behind. And I want to start this video by saying that I do not blame Freddie and Amita in any way, shape or form for the way that they portrayed their characters on screen this season. I think they did an incredible job, which makes this video and like me talking about my feelings even harder because I adore them. I think they're the perfect Kaz and Inej and they cannot do no wrong, but I would love to have some words with the writers for this season because oh my gosh. Okay, let's just get into it. Actually, no, second disclaimer, I also want to say that I went into this season fully expecting changes to the narrative and to the plot, and I was fine with that. I'm not really that kind of person who feels like adaptations have to be exactly the same way as the original material, but there are also limits. I just didn't want them to mess up the characters' dynamic, especially when it comes to the crows because they're my favorites, and I feel like they kind of did when it comes to Kaz and Inej, and I will explain everything. So without any further ado, let's just talk about this because I've been like fuming with all of these thoughts in my head for days, so it needs to get out. The first thing that I want to say is that I don't think that the writers of the second season did a great job keeping some scenes from the books, and here I'm talking about the Six of Crows duology, into the right context. And what I mean by that is that I feel like because they moved stuff around and they gave us Crooked Kingdom scenes before they gave us any Six of Crows scene, certain characters' reactions and also certain parts of the dialogues don't make sense in the context of the show. Let's already dive into my main example, and that is the How Will You Have Me scene, which is one of my favorite scenes in the entire duology. It is one of the most iconic scenes ever. I assume that since you're watching this video, you've probably already watched the show, so I'm not going to, you know, like tell you what the scene is about because you know. But what I want to talk about is the fact that in the books, this scene takes place way earlier in the narrative and also in Kaz and Inej's development as characters than it does in the show. I feel like what they did is basically try to give us that scene as fan service, but because they have it later in the narrative towards the end of the season, the context doesn't make any sense. That scene in the duology takes place as Inej and Kaz are not very like open with one another. She basically believes at that point that he wants to be with her and he wants to keep her close, but he's not actually willing to try and put in the effort. So that scene is her asking him to meet her halfway, and it is very brutal in the books as well. Like, it's a slap in the face to Kaz because he realizes that like she is not just going to be with him as he is now. She wants him to be a better man than what he pretends to be because she knows that deep down he is. But what I love about it in the books is that you see how it crushes them both because Inej wants him, she wants to be with him, but she knows that she needs to set up healthy boundaries because otherwise it's not going to work. And obviously it's heartbreaking for Kaz because she basically tells him like, you need to get better before I can allow myself to love you, and that is never a simple thing to hear. That's never like something that you want to hear when you're struggling through stuff. In the series, in the show, we have this very different version of Kaz, and I wasn't sure about how I felt about that at the beginning because I really just wanted him to be as brutal as he is in the books, and I've talked about that in my reaction to the first season. Like, I mentioned so many times that he is softer and like he's not as, you know, reckless. And now having rewatched watched season 1 and also having watched season 2, I understand why they made that change. Because obviously the actors are way older than their characters in the books, and so Kaz is kind of like in his mid-20s, so he wouldn't be acting like a 17-year-old brat. That wouldn't make sense, because let's be honest, that is who he is in the books. Like, he is a 17-year-old little mastermind shit, and we love him for that. We adore him for that. But Freddie Carter can't play that and have it being realistic, because he's literally 30 years old. So that wouldn't make any sense. So I love that they made him more mature. He's not a good person by any stretch of the imagination. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they turned him into a teddy bear. Not at all. Like, he's reckless, he's terrible, especially in the second season. He is so ruthless and kind of crazy, and I think that Freddie Carter did an incredible job. But there are a lot of little tiny moments in which we see that vulnerability come up from him, and we don't really see that as much in the books, especially when we're in the perspective of other characters. We see that from his perspective. But for instance, it makes sense that Inej wouldn't believe him to be willing to do more and to try and be vulnerable with her, especially at the point in which they have the "how will you have me" scene, because he just doesn't show that at all. Which leads me to my second point, or my third. I don't know how many points I've covered at this point. So as I was saying, in the show, especially in the second season, we have all of these little hints from Kaz that tells us that he cares more about Inej than he pretends to. For instance, one of the first things that comes to mind is the fact that he tells her straight on that Pekka Rollins killed Jordi. He also tells her that when he is going to be confronting Pekka, he will be comforted by the fact that she will be in the shadows watching, which when I first heard that line, I thought it was so out of character. I thought he was imagining that in his mind. Like, I thought that we were having like a vision of him actually telling her that, and it wasn't like real, and then turns out it was, and I was just like, he wouldn't say that. Like, that is not the ruthless Kazbreaker that we know. Because for him, showing emotions and vulnerability is a weakness. So that really took me out for a second. It's definitely not one of my favorite scenes from the second season, but once again, it shows that vulnerability that we don't see from him in the books until much later on. And then when he's angry at her because she wasn't there, because she was busy saving those indentures, we understand that, like, he's angry because he didn't know where she was. And on top of that, he gives her her freedom on like a silver platter, just like that, which is not something that Kazbreaker would do for anyone else but Inej, and is also a way that he's trying to find to protect her and to just make her happy and give her what she wants. So once again, another way that like he is really showing her that he's trying to be a better person, and Inej in the show basically just like completely disregards that, and she's angry at him because he snaps at her, which I do understand. And this is not me saying in any way, shape or form that like female characters should be expected to be lenient towards male characters who react like emotionally constipated little shits when they're having feelings, because I think that is stupid. That is not at all what I'm saying. And I think that both of their arguments in that scene are valid. Like, Inej wasn't just going to leave these women at the bottom of the ship, but Kaz was also expecting her to be there. And what I also don't like in that scene is the fact that Inej just completely disregards his feelings. She's just like, well, I did my part for the plan, so like, what's the problem? Which is kind of fair considering the fact that he's reacting very badly, and also because she doesn't expect him to show feelings, but like he did. And I know that book Inej would have noticed that, so it doesn't make sense for her character to just completely disregard his feelings like that. Also because she's like one of the most compassionate characters from the duology, and she cares about people and she cares about Kaz despite herself sometimes. So yeah, I feel like it would have been more interesting and it would have made way more sense if we had that argument and then later on during the plot she would reconsider the way that she acted in that scene, because that also happens in the books. Like, she tells him, I will have you without armor or I will not have you at all, but then in Crooked Kingdom, during the bathroom scene, the iconic bathroom scene, which I will also be talking about later, because anyway, she realizes that like she asked him that, but she also has an armor, and she feels a little bit bad at that point for not realizing at that time how much trauma Kaz had gone through. Just before she tells him that, like just before she tells him, I will have you without armor or I will not have you at all, he is basically telling her that he was trying to find her parents all along. And he was trying to find information for her so that she could try to find her brother, which we're not going to talk about the brother plot because this video is going to be 3 hours long. But it's so... What? It doesn't make sense that he would do that. He would go out of his way to try to help her and make her happy. And then seconds later, she basically tells him like, you need to be vulnerable with me or I'm not having any of this. It makes sense for her in the books to say that, but in the context of the TV show and of all of these little hints that Kaz cares about her, doesn't make sense at all. In the books, she is talking to him about the fact that they can't touch, and that is clear in the dialogue, but what you also understand is that she is not only talking about that. She is talking about his willingness to be open with her and to talk to her, not tell her lies, and be vulnerable. And that is such an important detail, because when you're watching the show and you get to that scene, it seems because she has seen him trying over and over and over again during the season, when she says like, how will you have me with your gloves on, fully clothed, your head turned away so our lips can never touch, it feels as if she's telling him that and completely disregarding all of his trauma, which once again doesn't make sense because she sees how affected he is by touch throughout the entire season. She literally pulls him out of the street when he's having a panic attack, and you're telling me that the Inej that we know and love, who knows how it is to not have agency over her own body, would say that to someone and be like, if we can't touch, I don't want to be with you because that's not worth it. Doesn't make any sense. Like, yes, it is a part of it in the books, and she is telling him that also because she wants him to get better and to, instead of like shoving his feelings away and shoving his trauma away and let himself be consumed by vengeance, actually try to work with her to get better. It's not her saying, if we can't do this, I don't want to be with you. It's, I want us to be able to do this together, which are just healthy boundaries that you have to set up in a relationship when you have things getting in the way. And as I've said before, I'm not saying that this scene in the books is not brutal. It is very, very sad, and you can see how it rips both of them apart. And I think that the worst part is, it is so well acted in the show. Like, it is so beautiful and heart-wrenching and like awful, and you can feel how it affects them both, but because the context is completely different, it takes me out of it. Because in the books, when she tells him, I will have you without armor, she's not only talking about his gloves, she's not only talking about his touch aversion, she's talking about his willingness to be with her and to be vulnerable. It is just so clear to me that it is everything that this scene entails in the books, and they managed to mess that up in the show, and it annoys me so much because then it seems like she's being like completely insensitive, disregarding everything that he's going through, when Inej would never do that. And even if it was because she wanted him to say something, to like verbalize his feelings, it doesn't make sense because he tells her, I want you, which, what else do you need to hear? And then also, what I don't like about the show is that in the books, she doesn't leave straight away. Like, she talks to him about leaving and hunting slavers, but there's a door open there. In the show, she just tells him that, and then she's out. Like, she walks away. So it feels completely hopeless for Kaz, and that is awful. Like, honestly, rewatching that scene breaks my heart so much because we could see all of the effort that he's been putting, and clearly she's seen it too. She loves him, and we can feel that. Like in the hallucination scene, she literally, like, that's what her mind goes to. Like, she wants to be with him, and once again it feels like she feels like the only thing that's in their way is his touch aversion, which is not his fault. He doesn't control that. So why should she be bitter about it? I just feel like they did her so dirty and completely disregarded her character development, especially when it comes to her dynamic with Kaz. Like, they gave us so much of Kaz's emotional journey and also his character development, but they didn't do the same with Inej. So some of their interactions feel so off, and it's just very, very frustrating. So yeah, if I can wrap all of this up, because I've been like here ranting for like half an hour at this point. I just don't like the fact that they took that scene and many of the other scenes out of context in the season, because I feel like it completely destroys the build-up and the anticipation and also some of the dynamic between the characters, especially when it comes to Kaz and Inej. Like, they gave us this weird version of the bathroom scene that wasn't satisfactory because we don't have like all of that build-up and all of that yearning and all of that tension between them, and they like changed the dialogue for whatever reason, which also really irks me. Like, her tell is not that she shifts her weight, is that she rolls her shoulders back, and that is just so much better. And it also works into building that character development and her backstory, because I don't feel like they touch on Inej's backstory enough in the show. But even then, even if we were given more glimpse into her past and into the depth of her character, the fact that she would be angry because Kaz can't touch her still wouldn't make sense, because she is also struggling with that. So it's just very weird. And I'm not saying that they ruin her totally. Like, I think that she is still a great character and I still love her. Like, honestly, watching her scenes makes me like happy but also kind of bitter, because I love Inej and I love Amita Suma and I think she did such an incredible job. She is so amazing. But it's just that some of the things that they make her do and say in that season are completely off, and it just really makes me sad. It's not as satisfactory to see her interact with Kaz and to have all of those big emotional scenes that we have in the books if we don't have both of their backstories to like truly understand the depth of their characters. I really feel like they were trying to basically do fan service, as I said earlier, and like give us all of those big scenes, those big impactful scenes. Even the slat fight and the Pekka confrontations, like, I love those scenes because Freddie Carter did so well. He was so good. He was an incredible unhinged Kaz. So I love those scenes because they're just so well acted. And that's the same thing with the kanej scenes. I love them because they're just so good and they embody those characters so well. And it just makes me even more sad because you can really tell that they gave us their all. They came with their A game and they delivered. They ate and left no crumbs behind. Like, everything is just so well done. But the writing does not make sense, because they were just trying to shove those scenes in our faces because they know that we want them, but they did not think about the context of these scenes, which is so important, and also the build-up, which makes them even more impactful. So yeah, these are my thoughts. Let me know if you felt the same way in the comments section down below. Like I said, will be reacting to the crow scenes from season 2 because I loved them. Like, out of the context of the season, I feel like they were so well acted that I just cannot help myself. Like, I'm still enjoying them. And now I am very scared that if they do have the green light for the Six of Crows spinoff, it is going to be very weird, because they gave us some of the most impactful scenes of the series, and like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the plot? Let me know what you thought of the kanej scenes this season, or just any parts of the Crows plot. Honestly, I could not care less about the Shadow and Bone plot. Was it just me, or was that very boring? So yeah, let me know what you thought about the second season in general in the comments down below. Let me know if you agree with me, if you think that kanej deserved better. And I will be discussing all of this and more in my little series of rewatching all of the Crow scenes from season 2. So if you're interested about that, please do consider subscribing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!